This isn't just a technicality. It literally is in our Constitution. And for so many people to say that just doesn't matter, think about if a politician will lie and violate the Constitution to get into office, imagine what he's going to do when he gets power.
Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have, I think for the second, at least the second time, if not the third time, Attorney Barry Ragsdale with us. Barry, how are you?
Great. I can't believe you aren't tired of me yet.
No, we don't get tired of it. Yeah, it's funny. We were just talking about the case a little bit before we came on, and just really who is involved in it. Now Joe Espy's involved in this thing, and it's really funny to me how you always find when you're talking about people with money or important cases or whatever, you always find the same group of about 10 attorneys that are involved in stuff. Those are the guys that you want. Everybody knows the competent attorney. Barry's one of them. Joe is one. I would say his son Bill is right up there with them as well. My first interaction with Joe was my first time ever laying eyes on him was during the Milton McGregor federal gambling trial. And he was representing Milton, and he was on the courthouse steps giving they pulled him out of his bathroom in front of his grandchildren, I mean, just this old school preacher thing that he's so famous for. But, look, before we get into the case, how is that going? Cause y'all are friends. I know you're friends. All you guys see each other and know each other, and y'all respect each other. How is that going up against a guy like that, that and you know him so well and you deal with him all the time?
Well, I do need to point out that those 10 lawyers that everybody goes to, almost all are Democrats, by the way.
Joe might be the only one. And I think Joe's probably secretly a Democrat. He just doesn't tell anybody.
Exactly. Yeah. But no, I'd much rather go up against a lawyer that I know and like, and that's a good lawyer. And there's no doubt that Joe and Bill Espy are as good as we've got in this state. So I would much rather deal with somebody who I know and can deal with and trust than a lot of other lawyers. So it's fine. And really professional lawyers, and certainly Joe and Bill fall into that category. Understand that you can argue like heck and call each other every name in the world in the courtroom and step out and still go get a adult beverage or, lunch or whatever, and understand that you're doing your job. It doesn't mean we don't believe in our clients or don't believe in the case, but that's how really professional lawyers get along. And I look forward to it. The truth is I'm thrilled that Senator Tuberville has hired probably the best criminal defense lawyer in the state, because it looks like he might need him.
That's great. That's great. And the best one's always throwing a nice shot just right in there. It is. All right. So let's talk about the actual case itself. Okay. So you filed, and we're going to get you to say the name of this thing because you know it, and I keep saying it, and I'm sure I'm butchering it, and so we're going to record you saying it, and then Chip's just going to insert it anytime I try to say it. What kind of a challenge is this?
Well, let me say, I did not go to private school, and Latin is not my strong suit, but I believe it is pronounced quo warranto.
Okay.
And it literally, as I understand it, Google is your friend. It translates to by what authority. And so it is a long-standing, it was at common law. It's been put into the statutes by the legislature, cause of action that allows you to challenge a variety of different officials or even leaders of a corporation and challenge their authority to actually be able to serve in the position that they occupy.
All right. So you filed this on behalf of 2 military veterans,
yes,
who are, I guess, technically filing it on behalf of the state of Alabama.
Correct.
Where they're called realtors, which I thought they were realtors. So, I thought you'd misspelled realtor in there. But they filed this challenging him, now that he is the nominee, because from reading your filing, that is when he becomes a quasi state official under the law. I read their response and motion to dismiss out of this, which and really, I guess the AG's motion to dismiss, because the one Joe filed, it really kind of looked like he just typed some stuff out on his way to the courthouse. I mean, it looked like he was just saying, "Hey, I'm here." And it just didn't seem like a Joe Espy filing. But their filing says, "Oh, you know what? No, this is not the proper pathway. That the courts have ruled that they can't really get involved into election matters. That quo warranto does not really work in this situation, because Tuberville is not yet an office holder, so he is not a state official." What is your response to all of that?
Well, I'm comfortable in our legal position. I've been contemplating and working on this lawsuit for a while. I have filed quo warranto proceedings before and gotten folks disqualified before in Montgomery County.
Okay.
And so I've been down this road enough to know that I think I'm right on the law. But let me comment about this, about the position taken by both Senator Tuberville and the Attorney General is, I call it the Goldilocks theory of jurisdiction. And that's not really fair because, at least with Goldilocks, she found one that was just right. With these folks, there's no opportunity to ever have a court interpret the Constitution.
Yeah.
Right? They take the position that you can't file a challenge before the primary because there's no jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't file one after the primary, at least in court, because there's no jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
And their position is after the general election, you can't even go to court. You have to go to the legislature. So, it's strange to me that the quo warranto statute expressly says the courts shall always be open to hear quo warranto actions. And Mr. Tuberville's position is the courts are never open for this kind of proceeding. There's no opportunity for a court to ever pass on and interpret this constitutional provision. It's basically only can be decided by Republicans, either in their state party or in the state legislature. And I just don't think that's the law. It's probably what they would like the law to be, but it's not the law.
Yeah, this is exactly the point that I was making to Josh before you came on and our show opened. Exactly the point. So I wonder though, again, and granted, Barry, I'm probably inclined to be a little bit cynical about some of these things. Even with you arguing a position that is absolutely logical, can we have the confidence that the Republican-dominated judicial system in this state is going to rule in a way that is nonpartisan?
Well, let me say this. We're very fortunate with the trial judge that we have in Montgomery County. I have 100% confidence in Judge Reed to read the law and apply it correctly. I don't think partisanship will factor in at all with her. And so your question really is, when I get to the Alabama Supreme Court,
yes,
how that's going to go.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I will tell you, you're only one of about 3 million people that have expressed that same concern with me. And most
Right.
people are very cynical about that. So my response, I guess, is twofold. One, I've been doing this for more than 4 decades. And I think you're required, if you're going to keep doing it as long as I've been doing it, to have some confidence that the system will work. And so maybe I'm a little Pollyanna-ish in that way, but I think the system will work. And I will tell you what I think should play out. When we get to the Supreme Court, most of those folks will have politicked with, hung around with, and buddied up with Senator Tuberville just because of the nature of elected Republican officials in this state. I think that court ought to recuse itself and have a special court appointed. Now, that may sound strange to you, but I've had 3 or 4 cases where exactly that has occurred. Cases involving Roy Moore, for example, when he had been on the court with members of the court, they all correctly stepped aside, and a special court of retired judges and justices was appointed I believe by the Chief Justice. It can be done by the Administrative Office of Courts, but that's what ought to happen here, for a couple of reasons. One, it ought not be decided by folks who are going to have to run in a Republican primary in 2 years or 4 years or whatever. And so if a special court can be appointed, and as I said, there's precedent for that. I had a case several years ago where the entire Court of Criminal Appeals recused themselves, mainly because it was a hot political issue and they didn't want to deal with it. And went to the Supreme Court, special court was appointed. And that's what needs to happen here, I think. If that happens and we get a court made up of folks who don't have to run in a Republican primary or a Democratic primary for that matter, in the future, I'm optimistic that we'll get a fair shake in the Alabama Supreme Court. So that's kind of a long way of saying I'm optimistic about the fact that I think there is a route through which politics won't decide this case.
All right. Well, that's interesting, and I'm glad you shared that because I think many of us were probably not familiar with that particular procedure. So, is there a way to guarantee that happens?
Absolutely not. It will be at the discretion of the justices, and they will make the decision about whether or not they want to stay in the case or don't want to stay in the case. I know all of the members of the Alabama Supreme Court, some of them very well. I practice before that court regularly and argue before that court numerous times. I have confidence. Let me try to be delicate. I have confidence in a majority of them doing the right thing. And frankly, most of them doing the right thing. And so there is no way to guarantee it other than relying on the good faith of the members of our Supreme Court. I will say in the state, we're blessed with a wonderful Chief Justice who I think is very dedicated to the rule of law and to doing the right thing. And so at this point, I'm optimistic that there is a path.
Yeah. I'll say this. I agree with you on that. And people, I think people would find that odd.
That we agree?
Yeah, no, that we agree about the Chief Justice. I think so as well.
Let me keep going though, Josh.
Sure, I'm not jumping in.
There's something else that I'm really interested in. You mentioned Roy Moore, and how this happened during one of the proceedings related to him. Which one was that?
I'd have to really go back and look. I'm fairly confident it was one of the appeals from the Judicial Inquiry Commission. After he was found guilty by the Court of the Judiciary, there was an appeal to the Supreme Court. It may have happened in other cases. I've handled a number of his crazy defamation lawsuits that he's filed, and I know that judges and justices that worked with him routinely recused themselves because of that connection. But I know it was done at least in one. It's hard to keep up with how many times he was kicked out as Chief Justice. I think it's twice, right?
And I remember too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so at least in one of those, maybe both of those, a special court was appointed, and it was retired justices and judges. We've got plenty of those around who would be available to make that decision. And I have a lot of confidence that they would make that decision divorced from partisan politics.
Boy, it kind of makes you think when you think about this and you say, well, we need to get some folks in there that are outside of the politics of all this stuff. It kind of makes you think that's the way we ought to do it all the time, doesn't it? I mean, it just this idea of electing people and having them run for office and politic and fundraise and all that just sets up some pretty bad situations. And I get we'd have a bunch of Republican appointees, but I mean, come on, no,
Well, I'm a firm believer in merit-based appointment for judges. Electing judges, particularly on a partisan basis, leads to some bad judges. And frankly, I'll frankly admit that goes both ways. If you've got a Democratic controlled electorate that only votes for Democrats, you end up with some folks that their only qualification is to add a D by their name. And certainly the converse is true. You end up with some bad and people who owe their job to their political affiliation and their partisanship. So you're right. It's a terrible way to elect judges. I've already seen people on social media saying that our judge in Montgomery can't be fair because she's a Democrat. Well, we only get two flavors of judges in this state. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no, you're 100% right. Let me do this. Does Tommy Tuberville live in the state of Alabama, according to?
Well, it does depend on if you count it on a day-by-day basis.
Right.
But
In terms of running for governor, can he
yes,
meet that?
I will say this: there is no way in the world that he lived in Alabama in 2018, 19, 20, etc. After he got elected to the Senate, I mean, senators do spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. We're not saying that when he goes to D.C., he somehow lost his residency, but you have to have established residency and domicile in Alabama before you start spending a bunch of time in D.C. And so the critical time period to us is that 2018, 19, 20, that, it took him like 2 years to move into that 1,500 square foot house. But that's the critical time. I don't believe he lives in Alabama right now. I don't think you could line up witnesses that would say he lived in Alabama right now, with the possible exception of him and Trip Skipper the Fourth, or whatever that guy's name is, that says he was there when they moved in.
That's a really, really tricky subject there. I mean,
I'm sorry.
No, it's look, let me ask you this. All right, so would you agree with me that going into this, you and your plaintiffs are probably the underdogs? Would that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so is it frustrating to look at the facts of this? And by that, I mean the fact of, even among most Republicans that you talk to, there is an admission at some point when you discuss this topic of him not meeting the 7-year requirement, that they pretty well acknowledge that he probably doesn't. He probably doesn't meet that. And they never really argue the merits and the facts of that specific thing. They just say that either they don't care because he's a Republican, or they think that doesn't really matter to them. That he's been the senator here, whatever. So is it frustrating to go in as the underdog when it looks like you are clearly the one with the facts on your side?
Yes. Now, let me say, my career, I'm the underdog most of the time.
Yeah.
That's the position I like, frankly. But it is frustrating to me from this standpoint. This isn't just a technicality. It literally is in our Constitution. And for so many people to say that just doesn't matter, I've told people, think about if a politician will lie and violate the Constitution to get into office. Imagine what he's going to do when he gets power. Yeah, and this is for example, the brief that Senator Tuberville filed repeatedly says, well, 400,000 people voted for him. They don't care about the qualifications. Besides being a ridiculous argument, the problem with that is, well, guess what? Just a couple of years ago, almost 900,000 people voted to ratify the Constitution that we have right now. The Constitution of 2022 went to a vote of the people, and twice as many people voted to adopt that Constitution, which contains this provision. And so it does bother me. I'll tell you what really bothers me. If Tuberville wins the election in November, he has to raise his hand, put his other hand on the Bible, and swear to God to uphold the Alabama Constitution. And the very first thing he's going to do is violate it when he starts occupying, if he actually occupies the governor's mansion. But he's going to, by taking that oath, swearing to God that he's going to uphold the very Constitution that he just violated. And
Barry, how many of those 400,000 people, would have voted for him if they had known that he wasn't, if they believed, or if it had been proven to them in a court of law that he wasn't a resident?
That I can't answer, because keep in mind those 400,000 people are Republicans, right? This is a primary where he's talking about. And I don't mean to say Republicans don't understand. I'm not disparaging all Republicans. Yeah. A lot of them. I am disparaging a lot of them. But
I would like to think that at least some of them would pause for a second and say, wait a minute. I mean, surely some percentage. Yeah.
Well, and I go back, there's only 3 requirements in the Constitution for somebody to be governor of Alabama. They have to be 30 years old, they have to be a United States citizen, and they have to have lived here for 7 years before the election. I asked those same Republicans, how would you feel about him if he didn't meet that second qualification? If he wasn't a United States citizen, would you say that doesn't matter? It's just a technicality?
Great
Of course
point.
you wouldn't. You'd go ballistic about it. I mean, one of my first election contests fights that I got into is when people started suing President Obama, claiming that he couldn't be president because, of course, he wasn't born in the United States.
Right.
Those were exceptionally crazy people, but that really mattered to them. He couldn't, they didn't want him on the ballot because they didn't think he was a U.S. citizen, and I think Republicans would go crazy if somebody tried to run for governor that wasn't a United States citizen and didn't meet that constitutional requirement, yet they're willing to overlook the fact that there's an equally important and valid requirement that he live here for 7 years before he run for governor.
Yeah, and that really is probably a better example, because before you came on, we were talking about this, and with that, like David had brought up, the idea that there's no court that can hear this, the constitutional requirements to be in the office, it's just insanity to me. And I said, well, all right, well, what if you find out a guy running for city council or whatever was using a fake name? And it was a felon in another state somewhere, and that was the reason he was doing it. You're telling me you can't do anything about it until he actually gets into office? I mean, but maybe this is the better example. You're telling me we find out somebody right now at this point is not a U.S. citizen? You're telling me that we're just going to sit there and wait until he gets into office? That's
And then even then the court can't decide it, right?
Right.
We turn it over to the geniuses in our legislature to make that decision. And you know what? I'm not on the prediction market, but I'd put some money down that they're not going to find him disqualified in the Alabama legislature.
Oh, they were going to let David Cole off. They were going to let David Cole. Chris Pringle had a whole scheme to let him slide by out of this thing, and they were already talking. You know what it's going to be? Well, the people knew all this, and they voted for him anyway. That's their great out on this. Okay, and listen, it's a winning out for them because they save a Republican, they honor Republican voters, and nobody gets hurt. It's over. So we know what the outcome's going to be. And it just, I don't know, if Tuberville can prove this under the law, then God bless him, run for governor and let the chips fall where they may. But I think there's got to be a court that in some way, shape, or form, a neutral arbitrator has got to come in and say, call the balls and the strikes in this, right?
Yeah, there's got to be some accountability. I mean, the Republicans, if they want to find somebody to blame for this, they just need to buy a mirror because this is their fault.
Right.
They should have screened their candidate to make sure he was qualified, but they didn't. They decided to just run with this horse, and they're going to find themselves. I think if this plays out like we expect it to, they're going to find themselves with the candidate disqualified and them unable to put somebody else in their place. They could fix this problem now if they really were willing to do it. They don't have the backbone. Certainly the state party doesn't. But they're going to put themselves in this position, and then they're going to cry foul.
Mm-hmm.
You've denied the will of the people. No, you didn't do your damn job. And that's just the truth. And they need to be held accountable. Their position is we are completely unaccountable to anybody except the Republican voters in a primary and the Republicans on the executive committee of the state party and the Republicans in the legislature. And that's it. We don't know anything to anybody else.
Yeah, if this plays out that way, the cowardice of it is really, really striking. That you sat on your hands and watched a guy. Look, Ken McFeeters.
The one thing I'm certain of, this is not about Ken McFeeters.
Right.
And there's no circumstances under which he was going to be the nominee or would be the nominee.
Right.
There are plenty of good, currently about to be unemployed Republicans who they could nominate for governor. I mean, and they chose to ignore those folks and to put in a guy they knew had residency and domicile problems, and they knew had all kinds of other problems, and they chose to nominate him and to give voters and citizens in Alabama the middle finger and says, sorry, you can't do anything about it. And that's not the law, and that's not the Constitution that I understand.
Hey, Barry, can you tell us, because we know there have been a lot of moving pieces here, can you tell us now what is going to happen next? How is this proceeding from this point forward?
Okay. Well, as we anticipated, the Tuberville and the Secretary of State have filed motions to dismiss the case based on legal grounds that we knew were coming and we anticipated. We put some of the law regarding that in the complaint, which is kind of unusual, but we wanted to get that issue up front. Judge Reed has now set a hearing on their motions to dismiss for next Monday. I think that's right, the 29th. At 1:00. And so we will have an opportunity to file a response to their motions to dismiss, which we're working on now. And she will hold a hearing and hear oral argument on that on Monday. I expect her to rule on that fairly quickly. Either way, there will be an appeal to the Alabama Supreme Court from her decision. And then we're going to find out whether or not this is going to work or not, and whether we're going to have an opportunity. And let me say, if I get an independent Supreme Court and they rule against me, I will, lick my wounds and go on. But I think we have a tremendous chance of succeeding. And this, as I said, needs to be brought to light. The rule of law needs to be enforced. The Constitution needs to be respected. And that's really all we're asking for, and that my clients are asking for in this case.
Well, I think that's all any of us really want. And like you, you get an independent Supreme Court that judges this thing on the merits. They issue a ruling. I'm good with that. Whatever, we move on, and whatever happens. I've said this. The Tuberville people think that I hate him. I don't hate him. I covered Tommy Tuberville when he was a coach. I actually liked Tommy Tuberville. Argued for him being one of Auburn's better coaches. May say something about Auburn, but I have detested some of his politics and some of the comments he's made and things of that nature. But listen, I disagree with a lot of people. Guess what I do, but this issue here is above that. It's whether you meet this qualification or not. And it just doesn't seem as though he does. And all I want is for it to be fairly adjudicated by some people that are taking a real look at this thing and not doing this backroom nonsense that happened at the party. I mean, if anything ought to invalidate their arguments for that, it's the way they handled that McFeeters challenge. Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. But I think that's where we are with this thing. And man, I appreciate you taking it on and also spending some time with us and breaking it down, because we really needed it. I appreciate that.
Sure. I mean, if I didn't mess up too bad, I hope you have me back as the case proceeds, and I'll try to answer any questions. I'm a big fan of David's, and I know you are.
Thank you, Barry.
Also a person.
But it's true. That's true. I'm here. Listen, I'm here to do whatever David needs me to do. I mean, that's all I do. I follow his lead, and I hope to be like him when I grow up. And
I
do understand.
Older than you are.
Right. Hey, listen, I'm working on the tan right now.
Okay.
So
good luck with that.
Yeah. Barry, man, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And have fun with Joe and Bill in the courtroom. That ought to be.
I know I will. Take care, y'all. I appreciate it.
Thank you. That is Barry Ragsdale. We're going to slide out. We'll come back in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a moment. All righty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Our thanks to the fine folks at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring. I really do appreciate them for all they do. Go see them. Telling you, check them out. Wind Creek Entertainment online. Look them up. Book a stay. You're not going to regret that. Also, the fine folks over at SPLC. We're going to have their new CEO on when we come back from our break. Which, by the way, we're going to take the next couple of weeks off, and for our summer break, we're taking the usual family trip down to Disney this time of year, and going to go over to the beach, spend some time with the grandparents for the little one, and let her run around on the beach with them as well after we get finished at Disney World. What I really hope is that I am reincarnated as my daughter, because she lives a life like. I mean, I told somebody that I'm really quite proud of the life I've given her, because it's basically whatever she wants to do, man, and but she makes it pretty easy though. She's a sweet little girl. So
she is a sweet little girl. I had the pleasure of meeting her not too long ago. She's a sweet little girl for sure. By the way, you've got a You've got a big fan out there, my friend Jarmel, who I'm going to call Dr. J because she just got her PhD not too long ago. Dr. J saw me at an event recently, and she just went into this thing of, oh, I love the podcast, and I just watch and love it when Josh gets all worked up.
Yeah, that's what my wife says too. She loves it when I get all worked up. But no, I appreciate Dr. J for saying that. And honestly, I never thought those words would come out of my mouth. I have a fan in Dr. J. We dreamed of that as a child.
That's right.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that. I appreciate you letting me know. It's always nice to have to hear that somebody likes you. It's really great.
Yeah, but she likes it specifically when you get worked up. That's what she really likes.
Well, then she really ought to like me a lot then, because I get worked up a lot on this thing. Oh, Lord, man, some of these people around here. Listen, we'll thank them. Thank the SPLC. We're going to have their new CEO on, like I said, after the break when we come back. And thanks to Barry Ragsdale. Always a great. We need to get Barry on more often. He ought to be like our chief legal guy. We need to get a sponsor for Barry and have him come on and just answer legal questions, because he's fantastic. And listen, I've spoken to Joe Espy and extended an invitation to him as well. And because I have to tell you, Joe and Bill Espy and the other Espy kids, they're some of my favorite people that I've ever dealt with. And I'm like a lawyer junkie. Okay. I love to go and sit in a courtroom and watch good lawyers work. It's such a treat when you get there and you watch guys who know what they're doing and are prepared and they're comfortable in that environment, and they know how to handle these things, and they're quick on their feet, with a comeback or the questions and stuff. And Bobby Siegel, Joe Espy, Barry Ragsdale. There are a bunch of guys out there that I find to be just really, really great attorneys, really smart guys that do this, and some women too. Charlana Skaggs is fantastic as well. I really like her a lot. And some of it just, to watch them work is a treat. And really Joe and Bill are in a different class. And let me tell you, I mentioned the thing about Joe doing the preacher thing on the steps during the Milton thing. Bill, his son, one day we were walking out of the Montgomery courtroom. They had a case there. And he and I were just talking about the case, about what was kind of going on, about what things that were happening around or whatever. And so we walk out, we're walking down the sidewalk, and I was like, well, whatever. And I hit the button on my truck, and I start to get in, and Bill's still talking to me or whatever. And he walks around, and he opens up the passenger door and hops in, and I get in, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, you're going to drop me by the office, right? And I said, well, I guess. And he's like, good, because I walked here and I didn't want to walk back. And then on the way, he's like, you want to stop and get a sandwich? And I think we did. And I think I paid for it. No, I think I paid for it. Yeah. But no, it's they're great, man. They really are. And they're comfortable in that setting, and it really is a treat. And I'm telling you, you'll like Joe when we have him on. He's a great professional guy, and I've known him for a long time, and I really like him a lot. And I disagree with his client's position on this thing, but I'm going to say the same thing about Tommy Tuberville that I said a few minutes ago. I do not hate Tommy Tuberville. I don't like what he's done in politics, because I think he could do more, because I think he has the knowledge base to do more. But here we are.
Since you've gone to great pains to say you don't hate him, I feel obligated to say I don't hate him, but I am profoundly disappointed and disgusted by a lot of the things that he has said and the positions that he has taken. And I think he is dangerous. I don't hate him, but I think he's dangerous. I don't think he needs to be representing the people of Alabama in any way, shape, or form. Now, I don't want to see him hurt. I don't want to see him hit by a truck or some tragedy befall him. But he doesn't need to be representing our state in any way.
No, I'm gonna couch it like this. I'm gonna say he doesn't need to be. If this is the person, this last 6 years, if that's the person he's gonna be, okay, that's not the person that I knew at Auburn. All right, that's not. I just, I think that's one of the things that bothers me so much about Tommy Tuberville is, and listen, I'm not saying he was some great humanitarian. That's not it at all. Okay. He was just a normal guy. No, he was just a guy who could go in and he could relate to, I don't know that I've ever seen anybody that understood how to relate to young, impoverished, primarily black players like he did. Oftentimes,
you mean a white man?
Right. Yes. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And especially
a white man with privilege. Yeah.
Yes. And especially a guy who understood how to use his position of authority to make their parents feel at ease with him and trusting of him, and also to use religion as part of that, because he brought Chet Williams on, who Chet was genuinely one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. He passed away a couple of years ago in a tragic accident on Lake Martin, I believe, the Lake Martin or Lake Jordan, and Chet was just the greatest guy. I didn't necessarily agree with some of the things Auburn did in using taxpayer money to promote religion and things like that, but I know that Chet helped so many of those kids. He was. Anyways, but Tuberville brought him in and utilized him to a degree that, listen, I know it was beneficial for Tuberville. I get that. Okay. Yeah. But he didn't have to do it. Yeah. He didn't have to do it. Well, he didn't have to promote him to such a level.
All right. Well, let me ask you this before we nominate him for sainthood here.
Who? Tuberville?
Let me ask you a question.
Or Chet?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about Chet. I'm talking about Tuberville.
Okay. I'm not nominating for sainthood. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Right. Let me ask you a question. Who is the real Tommy Tuberville then? Who is the real Tommy Tuberville? Because the Tommy Tuberville that we've been seeing as an elected official, come on. Who is the real Tommy Tuberville?
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter. This is who he is now. You know what I'm saying? This is who he is now. This is who he's chosen to be. And so and that's why I'm saying, that's why I'm so frustrated. I'm not saying this is the guy and you should love him. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying this was the guy I met and the guy that I respected. Okay. This other guy at Auburn, that's who I met, and what he's become, I don't recognize. And that's what has frustrated me so with him. And it doesn't, at this point, that's who he is. That's what he's chosen. He's chosen not to necessarily take the job as seriously as he should. He's chosen to constantly use the little buzzwords about woke and to tear people down and to do things like that, to take advantage, to attack the marginalized people, to belittle some of the folks that he lifted up for so long at Auburn and claim, and it does make you wonder, was he doing some of that lifting up simply because it benefited him more to do so? I don't think so. I don't think that was the case back then.
Well,
I don't.
As you said, it really doesn't matter who he was. What matters is who he is. Yeah. And I'm going to say that based upon who he is, to me, we already know the answer to who he was. He wasn't who you thought he was.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, how could he be who he is today? How could he be who he is today?
That's true. But, though, I also think of it in these terms. We all have family members and people we love who have gone down a dark path, that have chosen to fall in love with Trump, or have gotten caught up in a news cycle, who've gotten trapped in the social media stuff, and they've chosen, that they're no longer who they were. 15, 20 years ago. They're no longer that person as they've aged. That has infiltrated, and it's almost taken over their body. We all know people like this, right? We see it all the time with people, and we joke about it to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, more or less. I'm thinking of one person that I got to know very well, who when I met him was a conservative And I probably would have described him as, yeah, I would even say I don't think he didn't want to be called a Republican, but I think he probably almost always voted Republican.
Right.
But he wasn't, but I have to say, he wasn't or didn't say the kinds of things that he says now on social media,
Yeah.
in defense of Trump and against Obama. Well, he started. I think he started kind of moving in a sort of almost cultish anti-Obama direction, shortly after Obama was elected. But I think initially, even he saw the value in the symbolism of his election. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I mean, people evolve or devolve, as the case may be.
Yes. Yeah.
But I just still question the degree to which Tuberville has championed him. It makes me question who he was. And I got to be honest, the person I'm thinking about that I just shared about, I have to question whether or not I really knew who he was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, listen, Obama, through zero fault of his own, through doing nothing but being a decent human being, so radicalized so many people. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how that presidency was utilized so effectively by the racists on the right, to drive a wedge in people. And because you had, I guess part of the reason of the success of it was that you had you had a black president. And so, well, we can't be racist anymore. We voted for a black president. But so now you can just say whatever the hell you wanted to say. And it just lended itself to this downward spiral that ultimately ended in Trump and where we are today. And I don't know. Look, I know I probably give Tuberville too much of a leeway, because I did. Look, in some ways, I'm kind of, at least slightly, in a very small, tiny kernel of a way, responsible for him still being around here. Because I was part of the folks that reported on the Jetgate incident back in '03 that kept him around at Auburn for another 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years,
Okay.
and allowed him to go on to win what should have been a national championship in '04 with that team with Cadillac and Ronnie Brown and Jason Campbell and those guys. And do you know, just a quick aside, do you know that Jason Campbell can't be in the College Football Hall of Fame because he was
Didn't know
never a
that.
first team All-American? It's insanity. No, top 10 pick can't be in the College Football Hall of Fame. Our first round pick can't be in the College Football Hall of Fame. And so, but yeah, listen, that's just my thoughts on the whole Tuberville thing. I know we were also going to talk about, before we got to our right wing nut, which was going to be the Jackson Hospital people, but we're going to talk about the executions, that one that did not happen, one that is going to happen. And I will say, Jeremy Williams, is that his name?
The one who's going to be executed in August.
Yes. Yeah. Got no problem with that one. None whatsoever. It's listen, I understand this is a retribution issue for me. I understand that it's my point of view. I understand all of that. I understand that I'm approaching it from a place in which you probably shouldn't, but it's I got no problem with it. Would do it myself. For what he did, for what he admitted to doing, for the way that, and listen, they ought to strap the mother of that little girl in next to him, and do her as well. And I just, that's just my feelings. And I know that will offend a lot of people that are anti-death penalty, and I get it. That's my opinion on these things. This is why I can't take that step about the death penalty, because I think there needs to be some level of a deterrent, some level of an example made, some level of a punishment that is fitting of crimes against children in this way, in this right here. And I will say also, if it plans out to be true, those folks in the bunker ought to meet the same fate. That bunker, wherever the hell that was, down there where they were doing the stuff to kids. I have no room for this. And that's the reason why when people talk about the Epstein thing, there may be Democrats in there. prime. I don't give a shit about them. Okay. You mess with the kids, you get the hammer. All right. That's all there is to it. You know, all right. You mess with the helpless people in our society, and it's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Got to go.
Well, I guess I'll just say, and I mean, it's already well documented on this podcast that we don't agree on this. I certainly understand where you're coming from. I understand the visceral, emotional, I think, argument that you're making. And I'm a parent. I mean, so, I certainly, as a parent, if someone had done something to my child, I would have been the first one in line to say, I want to kill that person, and may have even tried, But I don't believe, but I make a distinction between the individual desire to want to seek justice or retribution for something that was done to their child or their loved one, and the state as an institution doing it. I think it becomes a lot more complicated. And I think that, the state really is not supposed to. One of the obligations of the state is to act in a way that does not reflect the individual rage or outrage, maybe even is a better word, that we may have in situations. It's supposed to provide a balance. And I think there are ways to punish people who do these heinous things that are just as effective. Life imprisonment, I think, is just as effective, maybe even more so, because they've got to live with the reality of the fact that they'll never see the outside again, and why they won't, and live with the nightmares that they should have, if they have any kind of conscience in them, of what they've done. And of the consequences, by the way, that often befall people inside prison who do what some of these people have done. I think all of that is well, I'm going to say, earned. They've earned all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm not comfortable with the state taking the role of executioner. Because a lot of times the state gets it wrong, and thank God for the Equal Justice Initiative and the Southern Poverty Law Center and other entities, the Innocence Project, that have proven that the state often gets it wrong.
Listen, yours is certainly the better position. All right, I understand that. I understand the flaws of mine. I get it. I do. I don't say it, and I don't excuse it simply because it's my emotional reaction to these things. That's, because I do think there is some societal value in that being an option at the end of these things. Now, that said, I will also qualify it by saying I think the appeals process is antiquated, is unfair. It takes into account that we were not racist, that we were not biased, that we had judges and juries that were not skewed, that we had prosecutors who were honest, that we had defense attorneys who were competent. It relies upon those things to be there until proven otherwise, when I think it should be the exact reverse, that we should have to prove that those things were achieved. And I think if we had done that, if we do it that way and flip it on its head, yes, I understand that we open it up to a lot more appeals and a lot more problems in the court system. I think if you save one person, it's all worth it. I feel like we take into account that these people are doing the right thing too much, and I don't think that that's the fair way to go about it for a lot of people on death row. I think that we need to go ahead and say, give them some options. We need to give them better options for appeals, and not make it to where it's just this impossible fight. If you get convicted in a court when things were not necessarily fair, or evidence was hidden, or whatever, it's such an uphill battle, and you end up spending 30 years fighting this thing when you were innocent all along. But yeah, these are our two positions. And I just, like I said, I understand yours is probably the better position on this. It's certainly the more moral position, I would say. And it's certainly, the one in which you would probably sleep a lot better at night, in most cases. But I just feel like that, for that stuff with the kids, there's got to be something more. There's just got to be something more. And I can never get, and that's always been I've held that same position. I remember going on this guy who was a right-wing radio host in Birmingham. I went on his radio show, and this had to be 2007, 2008, somewhere right around in there. And he was going to talk about the death. I'd written something about the death penalty, and he thought from what I had written that I was an anti-death penalty guy, so he wanted to have this argument. And I said, brother, you're going to be really disappointed to learn that I am not completely anti-death penalty. Okay, I think there are certainly cases like this, and most of them dealing with children, in which the death penalty should be applied. It was a very quick interview, so it's we did not have the fight that he was looking for. It just I don't know it. That's just the position I've held, and I can't get it, because Jeremy Williams is the reason why I cannot walk away from it, because I think there's got to be something more for people like that. But I understand your point and respect it tremendously. So,
what he did was horrible. I mean, or what he was convicted of was horrible.
Yeah, it's
rape and murder of a 5-year-old. I mean, that's a horrible thing. That's evil. That's just
it is.
Evil.
And like I said, his mother the mother of that child should be right there, because she did that. She allowed that to happen. So not the murder part, but the rest of it. So, all right, our right wing nuts are the folks at Jackson Hospital who somehow or another made the an insurance company the good guy of a story. I mean, I've never seen a beatdown from a bankruptcy judge. I've read a lot of bankruptcy filings, in researching for things. I've read through documents all over the place. I have never seen a bankruptcy. I've seen bankruptcy court judges get frustrated with people for not following through with what they were supposed to do, get frustrated with companies for harebrained schemes and things. I've never seen one as pointed as that one was from that bankruptcy court judge in Alabama, directed at Jackson Hospital and their allegations against Blue Cross Blue Shield. And it was just basically saying, look, everything Blue Cross Blue Shield said was true, and you're just whining about this and making it up, including the date in which you say you're going to have to close. That's true, And it just it just shined a whole new light on the whole situation that I think people really needed to see.
Well, I think what has happened to that hospital, I mean, hospitals are, even for-profit hospitals are, they are an integral part of the communities that they are in. And I think they have the people that lead those institutions, whether they're for-profit or non-profit, they have a moral obligation to those communities. And based on my understanding of what happened at Jackson Hospital, you basically had executives who were greedy and who also did not apparently commit themselves very well at all to responsible management. And so, the combination of those two things is what has led to this hospital's demise, as I understand it. And that is very troubling because, we're talking ultimately about people's lives and also the quality of their lives.
Yes.
And that's just for the patients. I'm not even talking about the probably several hundred people or more who, were depending on that hospital for their livelihood,
Yeah, it's a few thousand people. I think it's like 1,100 people employed there. Yeah.
Oh, okay. 1,000 people. Yeah. Okay. So, that's, it's just very disturbing that they could be apparently that greedy and that reckless, based on what I've read. That's just very disturbing.
Yeah, it is. It was very disturbing about the whole thing. And because like we heard from Stephen Reed, this is the lifeblood of a community. If you don't have a healthcare center, that's viable, and listen, that's a nonprofit community hospital. So those folks, they're serving some of the poorest. And look, I've heard stories from people. I've gotten inundated with calls and emails, from folks who've worked at the hospital for years. I had a guy that helped develop one of the cardiac department there. I mean, it was. The stories that they've told are all basically the same about this kind of mismanagement over a number of years. It was always covered up because of X, Y, and Z, leaving money on the table because they weren't competent enough to understand this and that, because they'd hired people who didn't deserve the jobs. And it just, but the people at the top were making out like bandits, and it just, I don't know. It's really troubling to see where this thing has been left. And of course, most of the people responsible for it are gone. They've moved on to other places, and, you've left some people now to clean up this huge mess. And, I hope that they can in the city of Montgomery. And I told Mayor Reed, we'll help them do whatever we can there. 'Cause I got a lot of people in that city that I know and care about, and I want to see them have a decent place to go to the hospital. And so we're going to do anything we can to help them with that. So, but all righty, let's slide. Remember, we're off for a little bit of a summer break here. So we'll be back here in the next couple of weeks. Until then, y'all be safe out there.
Peace.